Welcome back, everybody. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. So have you ever wondered what it was like to be a UC Davis student? Well, this video is right for you. I have done other college videos, and those links will be in the description below. They range from graduating early, choosing a college to apply to and also attend, and things I wish I had known before I went to college. So let's get right into this video. So for starters, I would like to go over the diversity scheme. So as you know, UCs aren't necessarily known for their diversity per se, and if you come from a very diverse place like the Bay Area, it will be interesting to be in an area like UC Davis. UC Davis is, for the most part, Asian and white. There are other ethnicities, like there's a decent Hispanic community there. There are blacks there as well, but and that also actually includes for foreign students or international students, as everybody calls them, at UC Davis. But even then, you'll realize that it is not that diverse. I came from the Bay Area, so I was used to this very multicultural, very diverse place growing up. So it was very different being at UC Davis. There are a lot of students that are there from Southern California, like LA, or in that SoCal region and claim to be from LA. And a lot of people are from the Bay Area. So you're kind of in this like mixed group. They do come from diverse places, but they aren't necessarily contributing to UC Davis itself being diverse, if that makes sense. Another thing to note is that the majority of people there, more than 50%, are actually females, so that's something to note. I think it's not very obvious when you're there. I was there for like 3 years. It was not that apparent to me that the majority of students there were female, but that is something to point out. Pretty much everybody, I wouldn't say the complete 100%, but there is like a huge majority, probably like in the 90% or over, of people at UC Davis are actually from California. They are not out of state residents. A decent amount. There are more, I would say, international students than there are students that are out of state. The makeup is almost 40,000 students, so there is a lot of students. When I left Davis, there was actually more dorms getting built in the Cicero area for the vast expansion of UC Davis and their population. And almost all of the students at UC Davis are the age 25 and below. This definitely should not discourage people that are older to go to college at UC Davis, but it is something to note that the majority of people, as you would expect to be in college, are actually 25 and younger. So the class setup was generally my favorite. Usually, and this might be true for other colleges, I'm not really sure, but UC Davis, for most of my classes, you would either have class Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or Tuesday and Thursday. So you could essentially divide all your units over the 5-day period if you would like to. But what I would like to do, along with other people as well, would be just jamming as many units as you can within a shorter time span. So a lot of my quarters at Davis actually were just Tuesday, Thursday classes. Some of them pretty much had to be the entire week, like language, generally speaking. I think all languages, 5 days a week, so there's no way you can necessarily get out of that, but maybe you could pack your schedule into 4 days and then maybe have a language class that's just in mornings. So by the time Friday rolls around, you just take that morning language class and then you could leave, or you know, just be on your weekend at that point, which is nearly a 3-day weekend, but not quite. But outside of that, pretty much all classes, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday. There were a lot of my classes. I majored in political science, so at a certain point, I think after my undergrad, or not undergrad, by the time my lower division classes were done, I think pretty much all of my upper division classes were only Tuesday, Thursday, or Monday, Wednesday, so Friday was pretty much out of the equation. Outside of language, I know the schedule would be maybe somewhat different for those who had to do labs and stuff like that. As one would realize from looking at photos, visiting Davis themselves, maybe even hearing stories, Bikes are a huge part of Davis. There's bike circles, which maybe a lot of you don't even know what that is. There's bicycles everywhere. There's parking for bicycles in specific areas. There's bike shops downtown. There's bike shops on campus. There's just bikes everywhere. This does not necessarily mean you need a bike per se. It's definitely advantageous to have one. I think by my second year, somewhere in between, like maybe halfway through, I got tired of biking, so I'll just walk class to class. It's very important to note that the campus is pretty ginormous, so maybe for lower division classes, it's going to be pretty like widespread, subject to subject, different areas, different buildings. So you'll probably need a bike earlier on, unless you spread out your classes enough for you to have time to walk class to class, which will take time. But it is definitely a good idea to have a bike. You won't need one the entire time. You might not even need to use it very many times throughout the day. Maybe you have two classes that are close, so you just park in one area, go to one class, then the other, then maybe take the bike home, or maybe to the newer location where you have your other classes. You could always take the bus, the UC Davis like bus system. You could use that to get to campus. I pretty much biked for the first year and a half or whatever, and then after that I pretty much used my car to get to school. So maybe you could have your bike parked at school, and then you could just drive to school and then ride your bike across campus or what have you. By then I pretty much took my car to the parking structure, parked it there, walked the rest of the day, which was perfectly fine for me at that point. I preferred it over biking, even though biking itself would be a lot faster. Accidents do occur sometimes, but a very rare occasion for them to actually happen. I've witnessed some, nobody really got hurt. First year students, I know if you live a certain distance away, or if you are even within that distance and you choose to, you live in dorms. To clarify, if you are far away, over a certain mile radius, then Davis would pretty much require you to live in dorms the first year. Unfortunately, they do not allow you to have a car, so it's kind of counterintuitive to a certain degree, because you would want to have a car, especially if you're traveling back home or back and forth like I was. So I'd have to get picked up, so it's kind of a hassle for everybody at that point. Dorm life is pretty much exactly what you would expect it to be. There are community showers, there's a community kitchen, stuff of that nature. I lived in Cuarto, so over there, all the dorm setup were basically in suites. So each suite would, I believe, mine had 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. This was all private, and we had our own living room. And basically it was just like an apartment. You open the main door, you walk into the living room, and then there's a hallway. 3 rooms are connected. One room actually had a private bathroom, so they got lucky, and then the other 2 rooms would share a bathroom. So that's how that was set up. So it was pretty nice, I would say. Somewhat different than your actual normal dorms. Each bedroom would have 2 beds, 2 people living there. Maybe some had only 1 person living there. I know that was an option. Some had 3 people, so 1 person would be on a bunk, or 2 people would be on a bunk, and 1 person would have their own single bed. The room size was pretty decent, nothing too crazy. You'd have your bed set up, then each person would have their own desk, and you would share a closet for the most part, but there are other drawers, so you could put your own personal stuff you don't want to share. So yeah, it was pretty much what you would expect. So another point I wanted to make is the teacher assistants. These teacher assistants are grad students, so they do grade very rigorously in circumstances which were very rare, where my professor would actually grade my work. I noticed that there was a higher tendency of professors actually grading easier than these TAs who were grad students. Maybe they were giving a rubric, But even with the rubric, they were still grading harder than a professor would probably grade. This might not be true for like math classes and stuff like that, where the outcome is pretty apparent. They might grade harder, more so on partial points in terms of how you showed your work. But generally, my classes were more essay-based, so there was a great room for latitude, and I think they would generally grade harder than professors. Even if you go to office hours with them, generally speaking, I feel like there weren't very many times, maybe like 2 or 3 times, where a professor actually graded my work. Usually it was a TA doing all the work, which is kind of to be expected since there are a lot of students, a lot of huge lectures, stuff like that. So TAs do have to break down students, so a lot of us would hope we would get the TA that would grade easier. So the issue there also became that TAs weren't grading at the same level, so some were nicer, some were meaner. So it would create like an advantage that was purely based on luck, basically, of like which TA you ended up with. That's actually one of the things that I did not like about Davis, but hopefully you get the TA that works out well for you. I know a lot of students want to look at ratemyprofessor.com to see who their professors might end up being for required classes. This is especially important for those of you who are choosing classes optionally. You definitely take into account who a professor is. Even in required classes, usually there's more than one professor teaching, so you might really rely on Rate My Professor. I've seen it done plenty of times where a class that has an easier professor pretty much runs out of spots way quicker than the other ones, so you could definitely tell that students are relying on ratemyprofessor.com. I'm telling you this because you should take it with a grain of salt. Actually, my highest grades came from professors who were supposedly so evil and hard and stuff. I'm not saying that the ratings are not true even 99% of the time, but for me personally, it almost never applied. I'm not saying that the ratings were wrong, but there are times where professors do change over time, so the ratings might not be applicable, and you have to take into account that you might not be exactly the same student in comparison to the one who's writing the rating. So for you, it might actually be very different than their experience, just because maybe they're not as well fit for the teaching style and so forth compared to yourself. So that's always something to take in mind. I definitely would look at the ratings. I'm not saying not to look at them, but always take it with a grain of salt and analyze how you believe you would do in that class itself. Obviously, if the ratings are all bad and all crazy, then don't take the class, or maybe think of a different option. Unless you really want to go against the grain and take it, more power to you. So that's something to definitely keep in mind. There is this idea that professors always focus more on their own studies and their own research. I never necessarily thought this was an issue, but those of you that maybe want more from the classes are going to complain that the professor might be focusing more on their own research and studies and journals and whatnot, and not enough in the lecture itself or the class itself. So that's definitely something to keep in mind, but it never bothered me personally. So the way choosing classes were set up, I'm sure this is true for all schools. The people with more units get more priority because they're closest to graduation time, so they get to choose whatever they want essentially. So people who are seniors get first choice, and the people who are just entering get essentially whatever's left over. Usually you get what you need. Obviously, a lot of students who are just coming in, they have certain required classes for first year students, so upperclassmen wouldn't have any reason to be in those classes anyway, so they're most likely not going to take the spots in those type of classes like basic English, math, science, whatever. So it's not necessarily an issue once you start getting into like more depth, where you have more options, or there's like more classes you might be interested in. Then those classes might actually be taken by seniors or third year students or what have you. Usually a lot of first-year students, freshman classes are designed just for freshmen, so you get what you need for the most part. But there are a lot of students, so it's definitely something to keep in mind, that you might not always get what you want, especially when it comes to professors. Tying it back to Rate My Professor, a lot of classes would run out quickly when a professor was rated high. So you would not always get the professor you would want, so maybe you would have to stall for a trimester, or a quarter I should say, and maybe take it the next quarter, or maybe you would take the risk of taking a professor that might not be rated that high. Overall takeaway, UC Davis is a pretty good school. It's rated really high, and within the UC system itself, it's rated really high within California. And most importantly, it's rated pretty high as well nationally. So it is a pretty good school. There are a lot of cows, there are a lot of bicycles, there are a lot of students. Something to keep in mind is that Davis is a college town, so it's kind of not near a city life. So if the city life is for you, then it might take some adjusting like it did for me. There's not much in Davis itself. I've heard that a lot of people that live in Davis are actually older, so they usually vote against developments in the city, and that's why Davis does not have that many stores or like strip malls and stuff like that. So there is some stuff to do downtown. Sacramento's kind of around the corner, figuratively, of course. So is the Bay, technically. But that is pretty much it. Thank you guys for watching. Remember to share, like, and subscribe. I have more college videos on the way, more law school videos. I have vlogs planned, maybe even some challenges. We'll see. Yeah, thank you guys for watching again.